Start. Namaskar, friends, and welcome to episode number 11 of Kabiriyat, our series about the works of the great, legendary poet Sant Kabir Das Sahab. And Ashwini, welcome to you once again
Thank you.
uh, into this program.
Namaskar.
Namaskar, and it's over to Ashwini for the session for today, as always.
Well, thank you, Manoj. It's been a very exciting journey doing this program and learning more and more about Saint Kabir, his philosophy, his works, and the message that we get in his philosophy. What's interesting, even though I call it philosophy, and there's normally a very strict understanding of what philosophy is in the academic sense of the term. The Indian philosophy was mostly written in poems and verses, and this is sort of the works of the saint or the bhakti saints, which is normally known as the works of spirituality. What we are trying to do is sort of figure out what is the message, philosophical message in these works of spirituality. So we are not denying that these are the works of spiritual saints, but we are just trying to sort of, revisit the works from the point of view of understanding the philosophical message and from the point of view of philosophical counseling so that we can apply this message in the modern world and see where we get with this. So this is our 11th episode, and the title of this
Yes.
episode is going to be Power to Change.
Power to
And
change.
yes, power to change.
Power to change.
And
Nice. Power to change.
it's our power of our mind to change our lives.
Wow.
But it really sort of, boils down to power to change. So the poem that we have chosen is Man na rangaye Jogi, Kapada rangaye. And it talks about, how we already have the power to change our lives by controlling our minds.
Minds.
So we have the potential power, and we need to realize that and implement that. So we found this poem mainly on the internet. And
Right.
so if anybody knows in the audience, what the source of this poem is, we would still like to know. But here's how the poem goes. So in Hindi, the poem says, Man na rangaye jogi, kapada rangaye. Man na phiraye jogi, man ka phiraye. Man na rangaye jogi, kapada rangaye. तन को जोगी सब करे, मन को करे न कोई. सहजे सब सिद्धि पाइए, जो मन जोगी होए.
Wow.
हम तो जोगी मन ही के, तन के हैं ते और. मन को जोग लगावता, दशा भई कुछ और.
Aha.
आसन मार गुफा में बैठे, मनवा चह दिस ध्यावे. भव तारक घट बीच बिराजे, खोजे तीर्थ जाए. मन न रंगाए जोगी, कपड़ा रंगाए.
Wow.
पोथी बाँचे याद करावे, भगति कहूँ नहीं पाए. मन का फेरे नाही, तुलसी माल फिराए फिराए. मन न रंगाए जोगी, कपड़ा रंगाए. जोगी होके जागा नाही, चौरासी भरमाए. जोग जुगत सो दास कबीरा, अलख निरंजन पाए. मन ना रंगाए जोगी, कपड़ा रंगाए.
That's so nice. I must tell the listeners here that in all these episodes, the best part for me, of course, besides all that Ashwini explains to us about the poem and the gist of it, the other interesting part is when she says all the words, because it really helps me memorize the words better. It's like a revision for me. So, so I hope many a times that she keeps repeating the words over and over again, so that it actually helps me. It might be maybe repetitive for people who are listening to it, but believe me, it helps me tremendously.
Yeah, it's a tool to memorize, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
True. So I'm just going to make a translation which is sort of not word to word translation, but as close to the words as possible.
Sure.
So here, the word yogi has been used in multiple ways. And
Right.
so it's just very beautiful, how the construction sort of uses yogi in one sense and in another sense. So yogi normally means yogi or an ascetic.
Right.
But, even in the modern world, we use the word yoga or yogic or, having to do with yoga in many different ways.
Right.
So the translation would be like an ascetic does not paint their mind, they paint the cloth. And here we should also remember that Saint Kabir was a fabric painter.
Right.
That was his profession. So,
Right.
he's sort of like bringing these analogies from his professional life,
Profession.
right? A yogi does not let go of their mind, but controls their desires. So when he says like, manana pirai yogi manaka pirai. So like they are not like, moving their mind around. That would be the literal translation. But basically what that means is that they don't let go of their mind. But they control their mind. They control their desires. People enjoy beautifying their external appearance, but not their internal mind. And it's, of course, true for all of us. We focus so much on our appearance that we forget that, there's a beautiful mind in all of us that we need to explore and continue to work on beautifying it. So those who decorate their mind and make them beautiful receive many psychic powers. So here the word is siddhi. So siddhi can be psychic power, mental power, spiritual power, depending on, what the power is like. But they say that there are a lot of siddhis, and on the path of spiritual progress, people get these siddhis, which sort of like, gives them some kind of extrasensory power to understand the world differently. But later they also say that, if people get caught up in their siddhis, then it becomes a problem for them to continue to progress on the spiritual path. But anyway, coming back to the translation, what Saint Kabir is saying is that those who decorate their mind and make it beautiful receive these psychic powers. The yogis have influential minds, while the others focus on their attractive bodies. When the mind becomes powerful, our life changes for the better. Like as it says, Dasha bhai kuch aur. People sit in yoga poses in a cave, but let loose their minds in all directions. When we sit stable in this world, it's like an experience of going on a pilgrimage. So, when we go to an ashram or a temple or some kind of pilgrimage, we are sort of in a very different state of mind. And it just seems, sort of very pure state of mind. And we enjoy feeling that way because we experience, more stability, more happiness, more peace. So that is what Saint Kabir is referring to. And it says that when we stabilize our mind, when we control it, we experience that at all times.
Right.
We may be reading a spiritual book and even learning it by heart, but if we never know how to do bhakti or devotion to God, there is no way to control the mind, no matter how many beats someone has used while meditating. So as it says that, poti bache yaad karave bhakti kaho nahi paaye. So you can read as much poti as you want, but if you never learn how to do bhakti, then no matter how many beats you have used, it really doesn't yield anything. So there's no point if a person hasn't woken up on the spiritual path despite being a meditator. So even if you're meditating, but if you're doing it without any bhakti, without any feeling of surrender or devotion to God, then you're just going to be stuck in this, like, Saurashi yonis, as they call it, or like,
Right.
84.
The cycle of birth and rebirth, right? So
Right. And then you go through various different, cycles of life.
cycles.
And and do not, achieve the liberation.
Right.
So the pathway to God has taken the disciple Kabir to the highest goal of meeting God and being one with Alakh Niranjan.
Alakh Niranjan.
Yeah, so Alakh Niranjan is a term that is used for God or self or the Atman
Right.
that cannot be seen. Like, we also call it Alaksha Vastu. And it's a term used specifically by the Nath yogis in the Nath Sampradaya.
Right.
So
Yes.
that is a reference here. And
Correct.
Dasa Kabira refers to, like, the disciple Kabir.
Right. Right.
And Saint Kabir refers to himself as a Das,
Right.
which can be, translated as servant of the God as well. But I think
Right.
it's more a term used for, like, disciples, or like somebody who's being very humble, and that shows the humility of the person. So I don't think it should be used as a sort of,
Servant.
literal,
Right.
translation. And think of Saint Kabir as servant. So that is a rough translation of the
Right.
poem, and then we'll move on to the spiritual interpretation. We get this question a lot, like, what is the spiritual interpretation? And of course, if a guru or yogi were to explain this, they would have a much greater idea of the spiritual translation. So
Right.
this is obviously a feeble attempt of, what the poetry or what this poem is trying to denote in terms of, like, being on the spiritual path. So while many people love to adorn their bodies and feel beautiful, it only serves a minimal purpose, because we are basically trying to look appropriate for that time. But that doesn't sort of, like, make us beautiful overall, in the sense of like, developing that kind of mind which has power. So here, even though, like, Saint Kabir is using the word, or rather, I'm translating it as beauty. He's used multiple words here, but that is just to show the difference between, like, what he's trying to say. And sometimes we get caught up in translation, because when we say siddhi, you can always question it, whether it's mental, psychic, or spiritual. And, like, there are multiple ways of understanding it in English, but in Sanskrit, one knows what siddhi is. Siddhi is something that, some people have as an extrasensory power, but not most people. And so when somebody has sort of, like, completely original way of looking at the world, we always see that the person has some kind of a gift, or they're spiritually gifted, because we don't know any other way of explaining that particular way of looking at the world. And we see that a lot about, like, people who are continuously creative in some ways. Like, how we were talking about Lata Mangeshkarji last time, and she's known as sort of, like, as having had the gift of Saraswati Devi. So that's because she was so capable, and continued to be very creative for much of her life. So it's that kind of siddhi. So again, when Saint Kabir says that people try to decorate their bodies but not their minds, what he's trying to say is that our minds are sort of, like, are under the attack of shadripus, and we are constantly dealing with negative thoughts. But when we decorate our mind with good thoughts and control the mind, and we stay focused on our goal and meditate with devotion, then one's mind has the potential to see God. And why do we talk about mind having that power? It's because no other species, living being, has that power to reach God. So only human beings have that power. And what is different in the human beings is that they have the capacity, to have the mental power, or they have the mind, which other animals are not supposed to have.
Don't.
Right? So when we're able to focus on the devotion of God, we have the potential to seek God. We feel the supreme power, and we relish life in ways that one can only imagine. So what Saint Kabir says as Dasha bhai kuch aur. So this message is very straightforward, but our difficulty lies in the fact that we cannot really put our arms around it. I mean, it is such an abstract message that the abstractness of this concept makes it very difficult for us to understand the concept. And we admire all these saints, and people with siddhis, and we always look at them and we see, like, oh, they are amazing, they're awesome, they're wonderful, but we cannot be like them because it just seems like, too far away from sort of from the means, from what a person normally is, to believe that we can be like him. But what Saint Kabir is trying to say to us is that yes, it's possible to be, like them, because everybody has the capacity to decorate the mind to make it as positive as possible, and then we are, in the spiritual path. So Saint Kabir gives us a key to changing the course of our lives, which is to control the mind from going in various directions, focusing on bhakti and devotion, and see how one can gain power enough to know God. And as Vedanta puts it, like, knowing Brahman is becoming Brahman. But again, it's a very abstract concept. So, like, to understand that concept, we kind of have to sort of walk that path and start believing it, as we go. And as we continue on the progress on that path, we, start believing more and more that this is possible. So for the Bhakti saints, the only possible goal for everybody was doing Bhakti. And therefore, they talk about the goal as, like, doing Bhakti. So life is a teacher, and all the experiences in life teach us sort of new skills and guide us to reach our goal, which we can also say the purpose of life. And basically, it opens the doors to moksha. So again, moksha is another name for the goal of life, which is, like, attaining Brahman, attaining moksha, knowing Brahman, or reaching God, or as Saint Kabir says, Alakh Niranjana Paye, meaning like he obtained Alakh Niranjan, or he obtained God. So now, when we look at these goals, which are again, like, sort of larger than life, how does it apply in our modern life? And I think it behooves us to, sort of think about that, because when we start thinking about it, we realize that, we actually practice some of these things ourselves, whether we realize it or not. And practicing more of those things with the awareness makes it much easier for us to sort of, like, be on that path.
Right.
So the reason why I was trying to title it as Power to Change the Course of Our Lives is because we are all trying to do that. I mean, we get stuck in life. We have some kind of situation where we feel we are unable to deal with. And then we learn different life skills. And it can be as simple as, like, a teenager goes off to college and they have to figure out how to make dinner, or how to, sort of feed themselves. And then they learn to cook. So that's a life skill. So likewise, when we get into very difficult situations where we don't see a way out, whether we have lost somebody dear to us, whether we have lost a job, whether we have, lost something major in our lives, and then we need to figure out what are the skills to deal with that situation, right? And one of the skills that Saint Kabir would say is that one has to stay focused on the goal, and one has to control our mind. So let's say if in a case where, like, we experienced a major loss, if we just let loose our mind and, invite anxiety and depression in our lives, then our time and our mental space is taken up by those negative thoughts, right? So we are not able to transform our lives in the path that we replace what we have lost, or we figure out how to deal with the flaws. So the transformation which is necessary, can only happen when we stay positive and when we stay focused on our goal. And then it enables us to experience very much higher level of vibrations, energy, joy, and happiness. Because unless we realize like what skills are necessary to survive in the new situation, we can't make any progress. Otherwise, we just get stuck and we feel stuck. And at that point, normally when we are feeling stuck in some situation, it's because we refuse to accept things as they are, and then we
Correct.
attach negative emotions to the outcomes of that situation.
Right.
So we experience sadness, grief, helplessness, and we feel completely helpless. So instead of, going in that direction, if we accept things, even bad things in life, as they happen, and we accept them as something that is out of our control, then we can apply our mental power to transform things into something better. And even if you make a slight change in our attitude and our habits, it can still help us, go in the right direction, and it'll slowly but surely get us to our goal.
Right.
So our challenges and tough times basically are a reminder for us to learn new life skills so that we can, face the difficult situations in our life and we can overcome them. And the goal is to sort of like, get to the next level of joy and happiness. So as, the Vedanta would say, such an ananda
Right.
or joy and happiness is really your goal. So that's how I would, sort of translate this poem
Right.
as applicable in our modern life situations. And some of those things are like, things that we're already doing. So it's not like we have never dealt with a difficult situation. But when we get into a difficult situation, we seem to lose our power. We seem to sort of like, get anxious and nervous and feel like maybe this time I may not be able to, come out of it or something of the kind. So Saint Kabir would say, just stay focused on what your goal is and continue on the path.
Well, hmm.
Okay, I just realized
And
that I need to plug in my device. So I'll let you continue for a second.
no, so what I was saying was, I think it's interesting that you mentioned the meanings of couple of the lines, um, especially this second line of the song. So there's this line that says, "So man na rangaye jogi kapda rangaye," and then it says, "Man na phiraye jogi man ka phiraye." So I think uh, uh, the other thing that we also want to uh, try to explain to all of you is different kind of interpretation that could be possible, right, as to how you perceive a particular line, right? So uh, Ashwini just mentioned to us about the meaning of this particular line, "Man na phiraye jogi man ka phiraye," so in which she said that all the yogis, they know uh, how to, I mean, they don't go away from their mind, but they know how to control their mind or control the desires that occur
Mm-hmm.
in their minds. I think the other interpretation that I gather from that is also, so when Kabir Sahib says, "Man na rangaye jogi kapda rangaye,"
Mm-hmm.
so here he even might be interpreting jogi as the one who claims that he's an ascetic.
Yeah. Yeah, he just
Right?
make a lot of wordplays on that word yogi.
Right. And then when he says man na phiraye jogi, man ka phiraye. So it also, I think, could mean that you are not controlling your mind,
Mm-hmm.
but you are getting controlled by the mind.
Uh-huh. That's true too.
Right?
Yeah.
So that is also an interesting one. And then there is this one line that uh, says, भव तारक घट बीच बिराजे,
Mm-hmm.
खोजे तीरथ जाए.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is very similar to another poem of Kabir Sahab's in which he says, मोको कहाँ ढूंढे रे बंदे, मैं तो तेरे पास में.
Yeah.
ना तीरथ में, ना मूरत में, ना एकांत निवास में, ना मंदिर में, ना मस्जिद में, ना काबे कैलाश में, मगर मोको कहाँ ढूंढे रे, खोजी होए तुरंत मिल जाऊं.
Mm-hmm.
एक पल की तलाश में.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another very beautiful poem.
And the reason why he says that is, it is all there within you. You're just searching for it all over the place.
Yeah.
So, भव तारक घट बीच बिराजे, आपके घट के अंदर, यानी कि within you, the भव तारक, the one who is the ultimate leader, or the one who will take us through or take us across this ocean of life. He is uh, residing within us, but you look for him in all pilgrim places, pilgrimage centers. Khoje tirath jaye.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another interpretation of this.
Yeah.
So, I mean, sometimes people might come and especially ask you, Ashwini, as to, hey, this is what we feel like. I mean,
Yeah.
you said it this way, but so it's perfectly fine to interpret in your own way.
I agree.
The bottom line is you should feel that you have gone one step ahead or one step higher when you listen to these saints.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. The
In your
spiritual
spiritual
poems.
journey. Yeah.
True, true. I mean, the spiritual poems always leave a very large space for interpretation.
Interpretation, yes.
Yeah.
So instead of getting stuck with your own interpretation, to be able to respect other person's interpretation, at the same time you elevating yourself a step higher every time you listen or think about these writings is really the goal of singing or reading or talking about all these literary works of all these great saints, right? So
Yeah.
that really has to be the goal, rather than engaging ourselves in unnecessary debates and arguments.
Yeah. And there are also some very interesting points in this poem, such
Right.
as it says Tanako jogi sab kare, manako kare na koi. And हम तो जोगी मन ही के तन के है ते और. So here, when he says hum to hai man ke jogi, so you can use the word ascetic here, that we are sort of focused on our minds.
Mind.
And tana ke hai te or. So obviously they
Exactly.
are not jogis; they are normal people who are
Worldly.
right, worldly, who are unaware of the spiritual powers or what the spiritual path can give us. Like, they haven't really sort of been enticed into that path because they don't have the experiences which are available to people who are on that path.
Right.
And if you try to interpret that for the modern relevance, then obviously we're all concerned about our appearance. So we are not going to sort of suddenly go into the woods and start living by ourselves, like the way
Right.
we like. We have to survive in the society, but
Sure.
I think it's important to understand again the meaning, as you were saying earlier,
Right.
that what we have to understand or learn from this poem is that it's important to also focus on one's mind, just as we focus on other aspects of our appearance.
Right. And see, the power of the mind can be two ways. Meaning, it's like a two-way process,
Hmm.
in the sense that the mind is so powerful that it can be channelized in the right way, in which we control it, and then if we have some sort of an intention within our mind that we have to achieve this, we have to fulfill certain goals,
Hmm.
and then if we control our mind, the mind actually leads us to those goals because we have that intention within it.
Hmm.
On the other hand, if we don't control the mind, even then the mind can be powerful, and then that's where the negative aspect of the power of mind comes to play, right? And then that
Hmm.
that's when you kind of go astray, and then you can totally get carried away and led onto the wrong path by the mind, because
Yeah.
then, because you don't have control over the mind absolutely takes over. And as it is so powerful, if it can be powerful from a positive aspect, it can be powerful from a negative aspect also, because
Yeah.
then, because you're not controlling it, it just can totally go helter skelter, and then you have no control over it, and then you just get carried away and get led to totally wrong directions.
Yeah, it's
So
true. And that is actually the hypothesis of many of the modern sciences,
hmm,
in fact, because, like the psychology also believes that
right,
if your mind thinks this way, then this is a mental disorder you have. If your mind
right,
is affected by this kind
hmm,
of anxiety, then you get to this mental disorder. And then they, decide like whether it's possible to cure a person or not cure a person.
right,
So I think, like, we always wondered as to why there is no mention or reference of mental illnesses in the classical philosophies such as
hmm, 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 hmm,
Vedas, Upanishads,
hmm,
Vedantas,
hmm,
and around that age, so to say.
hmm, hmm, hmm,
And I think partly it's also that, like, this message that was given for centuries, and
hmm,
it was like sort of very great attempt of all the leaders of the society, rishis, munis, and
hmm,
everybody
hmm,
who was influential,
hmm, hmm.
to keep people, on their path and to make sure that they don't fall in that trap.
Fall in that
So
trap. Hmm.
yeah, so right now we do believe that our mind is so powerful that if you're thinking about it this way, then, like,
Hmm.
you're going to be suffering from this particular disease or so.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I guess one of the things that philosophy tries to do is like stop people from going that direction
Wrong
and
direction.
teach
Hmm.
them to control and teach them that mind is powerful, but there's something else that's more powerful, and that is
Right.
our soul or Atman or God.
Right. Good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, so are we going to
Yes.
listen to
And
music
the
now?
yes, and the interesting thing is, in fact, couple of things. One is, because we talked so much about Jogi in this song,
Hmm.
guess what the name of the rag is in which the song is composed? The
Okay.
name is Rag Jog.
Okay,
So,
wonderful.
yeah. So, that, and the second thing that I would like to tell listeners is, when Ashwini was reading the lines, she started from Man Narangai Jogi Man Kapda Rangai, and then after those two lines, she read Tan ko jogi sab kare, man ko kare na koe. But we are going to be starting with those four lines first, and then we come to Manna Rangai Jogi Kapda Rangai. So just so you know the sequence of lines. So I think probably what we could do, Ashwini, is I think when you're uh, giving your description probably of the lyrics, maybe you could have those 4 lines first, and then
I could do
have
that.
Mananarangaya Jogi after that, because that's how the sequence of the song is, right? So yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'll be on mute.
Okay. Yes.
1:30. Mic level. Mic level. Controls. Tab. 2 of 5. Total play time. Presets. Jog. Selected. Mixer. Tab. Controls. Tab. 2 of 5. Controls. Tab. Controls. Presets. Jog. Select. Mixer. Tab. Selected. Circuit. Tagger on/off. Speech off.
तन को जोगी सब करे, मन को करे न कोई, सहजे सब सिद्धि पाई, जो मन जोगी हो। हम तो जोगी मन ही के, तन के हैं ते और, मन को जोग लगावता, दशा भई कुछ मन ना रंगाए जोगी कपड़ा रंगाए, मन ना रंगाए जोगी कपड़ा रंगाए, मन ना फिराए जोगी मन का फिराए, मन ना रंगाए जोगी कपड़ा ना फिराए जोगी मन का फिराए, मन ना रंगाए जोगी कपड़ा रंगाए। बैठे मनवा चहु दिसि ध्याए, आसन गुफा में बैठे मनवा चहु दिसि ध्याए, भवतारक घट बीच बिराजे, घट बीच विराजे, खोजे तीरथ जाए, मन ना रंगाए जोगी कपड़ा रंगाए, ओ मन ना रंगाए जोगी कपड़ा रंगाए। भक्ति कहूँ नहीं पाए, पोथी बाँचे याद करावे, भक्ति कहूँ नहीं पाए। मन का फेरे नाही, मन का फेरे नाही, तुलसी माल फिराए मन ना रंगाए, जोगी कपड़ा रंगाए। ओ मन ना रंगाए, जोगी कपड़ा रंगाए। जोगी हो के जागा नाही, 84 भरमाए। जागा नाही, 84 भरमाए। जोग जुगत सो दास कबीरा, जोग जुगत सो दास कबीरा, अलख निरंजन पाए। मन ना रंगाए, जोगी कपड़ा रंगाए। मन ना रंगाए, जोगी कपड़ा रंगाए। मन ना फिराए, जोगी मन का फिराए। मन ना रंगाए, जोगी कपड़ा रंगाए। मन ना रंगाए, ओ मन ना रंगाए, जोगी मन ना रंगाए, जोगी कपड़ा रंगाए।
So beautiful. Apratim.
Yeah, so thank you. And yeah, so we hope that you've enjoyed the interpretations that we talked about this particular song. And as Ashwini said, it's a very wide, like a panoramic song, in the sense that it gives you so much of different kind of a spectrum that you can view at or view from, right? So we will be seeing you next month for episode number 12.
That's right.
And until then, to you, Ashwini, and to everyone, stay safe, and as we always say, happy thinking.
And namaskar. And thank you again.
Namaskar. Yes, namaskar.